Good morning. It's the last session of the conference. Always good. Today we're going to talk about innovative rural business models as you are all starting to think more about encouraging and supporting entrepreneurship in your areas. Think for a moment of all the work that goes into starting a business. Have you ever started a business yourself? Some of you have. It's a big process. So if you go from I'm not in business yet to a traditional actual bricks and mortar business, it takes a lot of work, doesn't it? I mean, there's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of planning. You have to decide what particular type of business you're starting. So if you're doing a retail store, for example, since I run a retail store, we'll use that as an example. You have to decide what kind of store you're going to start. You're going to need to contact suppliers and get established relationships with them so you can actually get some merchandise. Oh, you're going to need a place to put the stuff, so you're going to need to find a building. And if you're in a small town, that means you're going to probably need to do some work to bring it up to code, right? And then you're going to need to decorate it. You want it to look nice. All right, so we're going to need a bank account, and we probably need some financing by this point, right? We're going to have a lot of things that we have to do. There's some planning. Now we can market and advertise, and then we can open. And that jump, that process, to make that leap all at once, if you have not been in business before, that's a dangerous leap to make. And if you miss, if you fail, if you start that business and it does not work, how bad is that impact on your personal finances and your family finances for maybe a generation or two? So what if we could change that just a little bit? What if we could build some stair steps, some smaller steps in between? So that instead of trying to go all the way up to that traditional business all at once, what if you could just like maybe rent a booth at a special event and just have a display table? Now, there you could maybe acquire some merchandise. You could probably scrounge up the money for that someplace. So you wouldn't need the financing. You wouldn't have to do the advertising and marketing. They're going to bring the customers to you. So there's all these little steps that you could do in between. And we're going to talk about 8 of those different models that cut that initial leap down and give you a lot of options besides going all the way to the traditional business all at once. So that's the plan. That's what we're going to talk about, all those ways to cut it down. There will be a quiz. Somebody has already spotted the fact that my grandmother was a teacher, and there will be a quiz. But I will tell you right now what the questions will be. Does that help? All right, so the first question is going to be, what examples of these have you actually seen in the communities you serve? So have you seen an example of something like this happening? And the second question is going to be, what opportunity do you see to make one of these work in the area you serve? And believe it or not, I will ask you for your answers. So we will be chatting together about these answers at the end of the presentation. So be prepared to be called on to give your example or the opportunity that you see. Okay? So let's start. The first innovative rural business model, and I say rural, and rural is in the title because I'm from a small town myself. My big town where my store is located is Alva, Oklahoma, which has a population of about 5,000 people. We're not a huge town, but that's my area of specialty. But I assure you, every one of these can be scaled up and will work in larger settings, in suburban areas, in urban cores, in all kinds of settings. But I talk about small towns because that's where I'm from. So the first one are event pop-ups. These are temporary businesses that may only last one day, or they might last just a couple of days, the span of an event. And in that case, all you really need to do is to be prepared to be in business for a few days. And that's a much easier step to manage than to go all the way up to being in business. The small town near me, Winoka, Oklahoma, from northwest Oklahoma, which has a population of just under 1,000 people. You know where Winoka is. All right, we've got some people that know where Winoka is. When I do this in other states, when I'm in Michigan, they don't have any idea where Winoka is. So in Winoka, they did an event at their all-school class reunion. Once every 5 years, they do an all-school class reunion. All the classes get together once every 5 years. It's a terrific event, but basically they just did the class reunions. And so this year, the Chamber of Commerce added a pop-up fair, which was brought booths downtown so that there would be more life and activity downtown. Now, you're used to seeing booths at events, but are you used to thinking of them as a business opportunity, as a smaller step, a way to get people into business and encourage entrepreneurship? And that's what they did. they ended up with folks that provided food, with retail, and with services. A local photographer who did not have a bricks and mortar location came out and not only showed her photographs and sold photographs as art, but she also brought props and had fun with having people come together, and so they could take the little sunglasses or the little smiley faces and mustaches and hold them up, and they did fun photos as well. So the service was able to provide a booth there as well. That gave her more experience that she didn't have and couldn't get, going all the way to establishing her own photo studio. This is a much easier step in between. It gave her access to the market. Another town that has done a similar project is Webster City, Iowa. Webster City is about 7,500 people, or 7,000 people. They have a population of 7,000 people in Webster City. And they do an event called Junk Fest, Junque, because it's dressy junk. It's not just any junk. So it's antiques, it's collectibles, it's repainted furniture. It's all things cool and old and vintage and recycled and neat and funky. And they started with 50 vendors, 50 vendor booths, and then they expanded. They expanded this year, or last year they had 100 booths. Now, if you have 100 vendors in different booths, that's a lot of entrepreneurship going on. Not all of those are new businesses, of course. A lot of them are people that have an established location somewhere. They're just using this as access to a new market. But there are people trying out a business idea right there. They've gathered up some junk, some nice-looking junk. They've brought it out and put it on sale. And that's Junk Fest. In that town of 7,000 people, they had 7,500 shoppers over the weekend last year. It's coming back again this year. It'll be in June. Terrific idea. And when we get to the very end of this presentation, we get to the last business model, I'm going to tell you about one of the vendors that's going to be at Junk Fest that's using a combination. She's bringing one of those other alternative business models and using it in event pop-ups. So we'll get to that all the way at number 8, okay? So that's event pop-ups. I will pause to say you're allowed to ask questions or to offer comments. We're open, so we can have a conversation here. I know it's late in the conference and we're towards the end, but you really can ask questions. The second innovative business model is tiny business villages. This is one of my favorite things ever. Tiny business villages. You've seen the big craze for tiny houses. Where are the tiny businesses? Well, there's a little flock of them in Tionesta, Pennsylvania, which has a population of 500 people. So not a big community. They were able to pull this off in a really small town. 500 people. And do you know where Tionesta is, or you just like the idea?
I like the idea.
Okay, good deal. See, you can speak. Really, you can. Thank you. So the tiny business villages, what happened was a building burned down downtown. This has happened in a lot of small towns. And so they've lost one of their downtown buildings. So it sat empty as a vacant lot with nothing on it except scrubby trees and grass for 10 years. Until the Economic Development Corporation bought the lot, did the dirt work, smoothed it out, and brought in the big, cute garden sheds. And they put false fronts on them that match the style of the facades of the existing buildings downtown. Now, their idea was they could maybe interest a developer in the lot, and then they could move to another lot. They'd find another lot and just pick up the whole thing and move to a new location. So that was why they went with the garden shed, so it would be completely portable and something they could use as a temporary thing. Turns out it's much too much of a success to move, is what has happened. These smaller spaces, just a few hundred square feet, something the size of your bedroom, is just the right size for somebody trying a retail space that isn't ready to make that big leap into a traditional building space. So they can make that intermediate step. So they have someone that's doing handmade jewelry. She has no other location. She was working from her home. They have the winery that is based outside of town a few miles, but couldn't afford a downtown building of their own, but they can rent one of the little sheds. They cost $50 to $70 a month to rent. They've had a waiting list since day one. What a terrific project. They put in Wi-Fi so people will linger in the area. Now, here's the thing. What are the results? What has come from this, besides all the great entrepreneurial experiments, is they were hoping to bring more life downtown. The coffee shop and the art gallery that sit across the street from this formerly empty lot have both reported increased sales and have lengthened their hours so that they will be open more hours like the Tiny Business Village is. They have actually seen other buildings have started improving their facades. The building owners have stepped up to try to look as nice as the garden sheds. So the people that criticized the idea saying cheap garden sheds are going to make us look bad are exactly wrong. It turns out the garden sheds made the existing buildings look bad, and people are trying to step up and improve now. So there's all of those results. And in addition, this is my favorite part, somebody that rented one of the little spaces grew too much, got too big, became too successful. So they were at this intermediate step. Guess what they've done? They rented a downtown building, and they have moved up to that traditional building space. That is how you encourage entrepreneurship. You give them those intermediate steps that make it easier to make the jump to each next level. So they've been completely successful, I think, in all ways around. Yes, Vicki.
Are they isolated? Are they close to other communities that can bring in more business than population 500?
Yeah, population 500. Vicki says population 500, that's not very many people. Where are we going to find enough customers to keep this going? Which is a great question. They are in a densely packed, they're in Pennsylvania, so it's far more dense than, say, western Oklahoma, 8 people per square mile. So they have the dense population, and people move around a lot more there. So they have access to that. But the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind about a business village is if you just put up one shed and you had one business, then it wouldn't work, right? There would not be the critical mass that you get when there are 12. When there are 12, every one of us, the guy that's carving fishing lures, the maple syrup people, the winery, the bakery, the Amish bakery, all of them draw in customers. And they share each other's customers is what happens. So they build up some critical mass of their own. Two other cool features that happen to be true of this one is right next door is the farmer's market. And right across the street is the existing downtown. So they have done everything they can to make this work. And the fact that there's a little group of them turns it into an experience. They advertise it up and down throughout their county, all over, and say, come shop in our market village, the Tionesta Market Village, tiny business villages. Yes? I say it Tionesta. I'm not sure if that's how you actually say it. Is there any Pennsylvania people in the room? Tionesta, Pennsylvania. And if you search Tionesta Business Village, you will find them. And then there's a link. I'm going to give you, I have a resource document that has links to a bunch of these things to make your life easier because I hate trying to scope these all out too. There's another town doing one of these in Pascagoula, Mississippi, which I just like to say. Pascagoula has a population of 22,000, so this has a much bigger base to draw on. What they had was, it was described as that dirty lot across the tracks that no one wants to go to. So it's just across from the downtown, the dirty lot across the tracks. They received tiny houses. They were Katrina cottages that were temporary housing after Hurricane Katrina. They ended up, as part of the emergency management district, ended up with them, and they donated them, and they took the dirty lot across the tracks, smoothed it up, cleaned it up, and put in 17 little cottages up on a deck, so they're raised up in case of floods, and they use that outdoor deck as more selling space. So you have your little under 1,000 square foot tiny house, and you have some outdoor selling space in front of you. And then the grassy space, they're arranged in kind of an L shape. The grassy space in front has turned into a community gathering spot. The high school runs pep rallies there. So it has completely changed from the dirty lot across the tracks to a community gathering place where people like to hang out on the grass. And they go to the shops while they're there. What a big change. And it's providing a lot of businesses with that intermediate step between not in business and traditional business. Maybe I can rent one of the tiny houses at the Anchor Square. Pascagoula. Please don't make me spell Pascagoula. Okay. The third of these business models are shared spaces. Again, if you have a smaller space to go into, you're more likely to be able to make that initial jump to get up in there. The town of Washington, Iowa, which had a population, I believe they have about 7,200. Fairly good-sized town. They were big enough they had an old department store that had been downtown and is since gone, but it covered 2 full storefronts and went all the way to the alley. So it's like 15,000 square feet of retail space. Believe it or not, they had trouble filling that after the department store left. So it sat empty for a long, long time until Kathy Lloyd looked at the space and decided that what they needed was a little village of businesses inside that space. So it's called The Village, and inside are little storefronts that actually look like a little village of shops, and they face onto the center courtyard. So all of these little smaller spaces, and then in the center space, there are actually little push carts. So if you can't maybe even make it up to 200 square feet, can you fill 20 square feet of a push cart or just 5 square feet of a table? So people have lots of different opportunities, lots of small stair steps. And Kathy told me, I truly believe this is the future of retail in small communities. She has seen vendors go from tabletop to push cart to small space to larger space to their own business, out and independent in the community. That's the way to encourage entrepreneurship. Small steps that move people forward. There are other communities that are doing this as well, bigger towns. This is the Shops at Modiv, and it is in, oh my gosh, I've just blanked. Grand Rapids, Michigan, which has a population of about 200,000. Do you know them? Do you know Grand Rapids? It's about 200,000. So the Shops at Modiv is this space that was too large, couldn't be rented. The developer was frustrated with not renting it out, so they carved it up into 10 small and easily reconfigured spaces, into which a whole variety of different businesses have moved. And I want to read you something that's right on their website. It says, designed as an innovative and flexible retail incubator, the Shops at Modiv draw both startups and established retailers to the heart of downtown Grand Rapids in one unique space. So they understand exactly what they're doing. They know that they are developing a little incubator for new ideas and for established businesses to start a second location.
So is this one similar to what you would see like in a consignment shop where they have really small booths? It's just like the sections are bigger and they actually have a worker or retail person there at one of these, at each one of the spaces instead?
That's a good question. This one in particular, they're actually they each have walls. So it looks a little more like the Village inside in that in Modiv, each of those shops has actual structured walls. I'm going to tell you about another example where they don't have structured walls and it looks more like a flea market or an antique mall in just a second. So there's a whole range. Like you can do this however you can figure out a way to make it work in your town. And we'll talk about one in particular where they can't do walls in just a second. So this one has walls, this one has walls. There's another one, this one is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Fort Wayne, which has about 250,000 people, so a larger community. They have one storefront, so it's only one storefront wide, but there are 14 little shops in there now, including one that doesn't have walls. It's only got 2 walls that back up behind it, and so it's open. They call it the kiosk. And then in front they have a commons area where they run pop-ups that can only run one day. There's a limit. You can only run a pop-up up front for one day only. So people can come in, try an idea, and then they got to go. And so you got to be focused if you're going to do that. You're like, I've got a day. I'm going to be in this great location. I'm going to figure out everything. It's going to look good. I'm going to have it really, really beautiful and figure out as much as I can in that one experiment what it is that I'm going to do. So that is the one in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so it's got walls. There's another example in Roscommon County in Michigan. And what happens there is they actually have a building that's used for boat storage in the winter. Now, in the summer, the boats all go to the water, but people come to town. And so here's this huge empty building that's boats all winter and now nothing all summer. So my friend Deb Brown was touring there, and they walked her through the building and said, what could we do with this in the summer? She said, we're going to do shared space. We're going to divide it up. You're going to have booths. You're just going to take chalk and you're going to mark on the floor. This is the one I was saying where they can't do walls, because if they put up walls, where are they going to put the boats? So, and it's boats first. Boats pay the rent for the building. That's the way they cover their expenses. So they're in there. While Deb is explaining this concept to them, they get on the phone with the building owner who says, yes, let's do it. They get on the phone with some people who might exhibit who say, all right. They get on the phone with the city government and say, is it going to be okay? And they're like, we'll figure it out. So there they are with chalk on the floor talking about dividing it up and how they can do space and setting up a central area that's going to be a shared workspace so that they have a lot of crafters in town. So in their town, they're thinking it'll be a lot of craft displays as opposed to small retail of existing products. So they're going to put a shared working space in the middle. So it's going to be like co-working for crafters in the middle. We'll talk about co-working and for crafters in a minute. So that's an example of one where they couldn't do walls because all they had was the big empty building. But there's going to be boats in there all winter. So you take these ideas, you flex them, but you hold on to that central core. How can we make smaller spaces, smaller steps that people can use? Okay. Number 4, season-long pop-ups. We talked about those one-day pop-ups. We talked about those at-event pop-ups. How about long-term pop-ups? Now, you don't really want to go into and these are particularly empty buildings. This is where you take those empty buildings and you pop up something in them temporarily. You don't want to sign the 5-year lease on the empty building if you're not sure if your idea is going to work. But maybe you could do a 5-week program and cover from Thanksgiving through Christmas, in which case you get all the holiday sales and you have a much better opportunity to take advantage of the holiday sales, everything that's going on, and learn a lot before you try to sign a long-term lease and commit to a building and doing renovations and all of that. So in this case, in season-long pop-ups, generally they're decorated pretty simply. There's no structural changes. You know, you hang and put stuff up and set up racks, but you don't really paint and remodel and redo walls. So that kind of a pop-up helps you to fill an empty building. The community of Homewood, Illinois, which has about 20,000 people, used pop-ups to cover the holiday season. They had some empty buildings. They had a beautiful downtown, but they had some empty buildings. So they popped up businesses into 7 of the empty buildings. And that gave them fewer gaps in their downtown, helped fill it in. And then Paula Walrick told me that who is their director there at the Village of Homewood, told me that they used also consistent signage, like they made signs that was the same display for all the shops to get involved in having a communal display, so it all looked consistent. She called it a consistent pedestrian experience in the shopping district, which means it looked really nice downtown if you were walking around, and that was the goal. And Laura, who is their marketing person, told me that she sees their downtown as an incubator for new ideas, where people try out existing businesses and new businesses all the time. So they're seeing that concept, that their downtown can be an incubator for new ideas. And the Retail Association in Illinois, the director for the Retail Association in Illinois said that he sees this because it provides a better shopping experience for everyone. It provides the temporary businesses a chance to get seen, and the existing businesses benefit from more shoppers and a better environment to sell in, and so everybody benefits from doing the pop-ups in the empty buildings. And we've seen these in big cities. That picture happens to be taken in London in the Piccadilly neighborhood. There are plenty of places in big cities that are also using pop-ups to fill empty buildings on a temporary basis. And there's one more example. No, we'll do it here. This is where it is. The next model is store inside a store or business inside a business. And this is where you take that existing business and you put something inside of it to provide more interest. So we just talked about Homewood, Illinois, and their season-long pop-ups. One of those was an Argentinian restaurant that has a location in another town. I heard somebody go, lunch is coming up, don't worry. But it won't be Argentinian, I'm sure. So the Argentinian restaurant was looking at Homewood for a second location. So rather than try to just buy a building and test it out by putting all of the expense into it, they found the Global Furniture store because they thought global furniture, Argentinian food, perfect match. So they brought over a very tiny selection of their menu, just empanadas, which sounds really good, doesn't it? We're all getting hungry. So they bring the empanadas, they set up inside the Global Furniture store, and they find out whether Argentinian food is a good fit in Homewood, Illinois, because they ran that test using the existing space. How about that? So business inside a business. I was in Webster City, Iowa, and I walked into the bakery, and I paid for my stuff, and I waited for them to make my sandwich there, and I turned around, and behind me is Favorite Things, a pop-up retail store inside of the bakery that just happens to be in the waiting area where you wait for your sandwich. Hey, somebody was thinking there. So they've got home decor, little furniture, a small space that just has some cool stuff that you can browse while you're waiting for your sandwich. Next to that is a rack of books from a local author. There's another pop-up inside a store. So encouraging all kinds of entrepreneurship, store inside a store, right inside the bakery. So this is just one of those awesome concepts. Once you realize it, think how many buildings in your town have a business in it that they don't fill it quite full. Have a little extra space. I can tell you, I walked into my own insurance agent. After I put this together, I walked into my own insurance agent's office and I went, look at all this space. They're in a traditional storefront. It's far too wide and far too deep. They really need the storage in the back and like one office and the reception desk. So half of the frontage is empty up front, and the entire front area is got nothing going on. They've got some plants in the window. And I'm thinking to myself, business inside a business. We're going to put something in here, pop up. We'll have a whole series of them. They can be temporary. They can come in. They can go out. So you'll start seeing these opportunities as you walk around town, and you'll go, ooh, we could pop up a business in there. Do they know that? Are they aware that they have this space? So you'll be looking for these as you walk around. Perhaps the best example of this, well, there's two examples. One is this one, which was during a shopping event in Alva, Oklahoma, up in northwest Oklahoma. That's my hometown, 5,000 people. In Alva, we do a shopping night called Ladies' Night Out, and the idea is to bring ladies downtown to shop in the evening. So the local furniture and decor store opened up and popped up 2 additional businesses inside while they were there. So it happened to be 2 home-based businesses. A woman that offers silk-potted jewelry took over a coffee table and spread her jewelry out on the table. She doesn't have a traditional storefront. She works from home or does home parties. Here she was able to access a whole new group of market, a number of people that hadn't seen her before, and certainly something she couldn't afford to do on her own. She couldn't afford to rent a building just to be there for a ladies' night out, but she could set up on the coffee table at the home decor store. And also at the same time, in the same business, was a lady who's a skincare consultant who works out of her home and does home parties, who set up on a standing bar and did demonstrations right there. So that gave people 2 new reasons to come into the home decor store, and everybody gets more customers. It provided more life and activity around her event and added something to the shopping event. So even if you just have one business, you could pop up some additional stuff inside of it and make more interest and activity even in the smallest of towns. And then when I gave this presentation for the Northwest Oklahoma Workforce Board, Alex Mance, who is the chamber director for Alva, Oklahoma, and also the economic developer, and also the tourism person, because that's how it is in a small town, said, you know, the great example of this is beauty salons. And all the ladies go, yeah, and all the guys go, what are they talking about? I guess the barber shop is a little different. The barber shop is not a business inside a business the way the beauty salon is. Every beauty salon, when you walk in, there's the salon owner, but then there's somebody running another booth. She rents that booth. She is an independent contractor renting that booth from the salon owner. That makes her an entrepreneur. The woman doing massages out of a rented room there on the side of the salon, she's an independent contractor. She's an entrepreneur. Could she afford to build her own salon just to do massage? No, she's using that small step. She's using borrowed space, business inside a business. And then if you walk around inside the salon, what do you see? All kinds of products are on display and available for sale. There's hair care products. Those probably belong to the salon owner. But who brought that jewelry in? Some local entrepreneur. And you bought that. You bought that at your beauty salon. That's awesome. And that's how this works. So there's the jewelry, there's candles, there's scarves, there's all kinds of stuff that's made locally or brought in locally, and it's put on display. Who's putting that there? Local entrepreneurs. That's a pop-up. That is somebody who is trying a temporary test to find out what works and what Vicky will buy when she goes to the salon. And once Vicky makes a purchase, they go, okay, we know more now about what's going to sell in this area. So they're collecting market intelligence, except they will never call it any of that. They will say, oh, I put some stuff on display in the salon. It's up to you to recognize them as entrepreneurs and to count them in your entrepreneurship promotion and to encourage them by making purchases and by telling them when you see them, I know you're an entrepreneur and I appreciate what you do for the community. because they don't get that very often.
Well, an aspect to that also is time, because, so you make time to get your hair cut, because time is real relevant.
Yeah.
And then you need a birthday gift, so it's there, so you don't have to go to another place.
Right. She's saying that the time is the relevant element there because you make time to go get your hair cut. You will make time to get your hair done, right? But the question is, do you have enough time to then go find the birthday gift? Well, there's the jewelry display. Well, Vicki bought for herself, but that's okay too. But she has bought gifts. Okay. And I tell you, I was at my own salon and realized they had jewelry and gifts and all kinds of stuff. I was looking over that jewelry going, my sister might like this. So these kind of things happen. It's the foot traffic. That's what Alex pointed out to me is it's the foot traffic in the salon that turns it into an economic development incubator. Okay. Model number 6, co-working. Model number 6 is co-working. Love co-working. Co-working is something that's traditionally associated as being an urban phenomenon happening in urban centers where cool guys with laptops and beards are all hanging out programming the next app, right? Well, the Global Co-working Conference Unconference, that's the actual name of the event, issued their findings this past year. One of their 6 trends is the spread of co-working outside of the cool, hip, urban core and into suburbs, rural areas, small towns, islands, they said, everywhere. So co-working is going everywhere. And this is a big and important trend. And I know of several co-working spaces in small towns, and they're really great. Pella, Iowa has one called Wielhoden, which is, now don't make fun of my Dutch accent, but it means many hats is what it means in Dutch. And so that is a great place where people can come, bring their laptops, work together in a shared space. Usually there'll be a shared office where people can work out of it or have shared offices. There are private offices, usually very small, that can be rented exclusively. Usually there'll be a conference room where you can sit down and meet with someone in private, and some training space where you can hold a training and teach folks right there. Now, how many independent laptop-based workers could afford to build their own office and get started in the traditional way? All right. Now, how many of us could afford to rent a co-working office? Okay, there we go. There's that intermediate step that provides you with more support for your entrepreneurs. Joel Bennett, who started that co-working space in Pella, Iowa, told me that co-working is exciting because it is more professional than working out of the coffee shop and borrowing Wi-Fi. It is more interesting than being at a table at the library, and it is far more interactive than being alone working at home. And so that's the allure of co-working, is this opportunity to connect with other folks. Pella, Iowa, where Wielhoden is located, is a town of 5,000 people. So smaller and smaller towns are seeing co-working spaces springing up. There's one in Webster City, Iowa also, that's a town of 7,000 people. And there are lots more examples growing everywhere. We, in fact, tried one of these in Alva, Oklahoma, which is about 5,000 people. We tried it out. I worked with the Small Business Development Center to borrow one office in their office space. They have an open front area that was wired up as a computer lab, and then the college, changed things around. So it had beautiful internet. Man, it had screaming fast internet. It had working space. We could borrow some desks. We did all of that. But it was scuttled by 2 things. Number one, I had not done enough work to build a community amongst the people who needed to use it so that they would come and take advantage of it. And then the second thing is the SBDC no longer has an office in Alva, so we don't have access to the space. So that's the way things work when you experiment. That's the entrepreneurial way. You try, you fail, you succeed, you learn, and you keep doing things. And so as you're supporting entrepreneurship, never be surprised when things fail. And don't be afraid to admit that things that you tried failed, because we've all done things that have failed. Or you've never done anything if you have never failed. So that was one that we tried that did not work out for us, but that's the way it happens with entrepreneurship. Some things come and then they go.
Becky,
Yes.
do some of these spaces have entities like the Small Business Development Center? They probably were helping the entrepreneurs, but
Yes.
do any of these other models have people who come in and help the entrepreneurs understand how to do business?
Okay. Vicki's asking whether co-working spaces will have a support service like the Small Business Development Center that will come in and train the entrepreneurs. And that varies because there are thousands of them now. Most of them are just kind of a community-oriented space, and so they're run by the community and not connected to an entity or organization that traditionally provides that kind of service. Some of them, like ours in Alva, were sponsored by the SBDC, and so we did have a lot of support that was available. In those cases where it's primarily a community-driven thing, one of the things I've noticed is the entrepreneurs support each other. And there's a lot of connection that goes on, answering of questions. Hey, how have you dealt with this problem? I've got a client that won't pay and they still want more work. What should we do? So they talk to each other. And they're also a really great hunting ground. Like if you're looking for entrepreneurs to support, the co-working space is a great place to look for them. As well as all these other examples that we've just talked about, the business inside a business, the beauty salons, the pop-ups, the people that are using a vendor table at an event. So you can walk around at any event that has booths now and go, entrepreneurs to support, okay. So these are great opportunities to connect with the very people that you're looking to support. If you took co-working spaces and you added equipment to make something, you'd have maker spaces. So we've actually seen this start to happen. Co-working spaces are adding additional equipment like 3D printers or metalworking equipment or woodworking equipment or electronics labs. And that's what they did in Sonora, California. They lost a hospital. Now, lots of small towns have had this problem of losing a hospital. What Sonora did is they put in the innovation lab. So they started with screaming fast internet, and then they put in some computers with app and gaming programming software so that people could sit down and actually do the two hottest areas of programming that are available right now. And then they added 3D printers. Make your design the thing, print it out, there you go. Then they added the electronics lab, so you can do your wiring up of electronics, grab your soldering iron, make something out of that. And then they added a metalworking shop, so if you can weld it up, and a woodworking shop, so you can carve it out. So they have all of these facilities available. How many entrepreneurs in Sonora, California could afford to do this all themselves? Very few. But by taking over that existing asset in the community, providing those tools to them, lots more entrepreneurs are going to get together. And do you know what happens when you get two makers together? They start tinkering. They're tinkering, they're giving each other advice, and they're going, hey, you're doing that wrong. Let me show you how you should be doing that. Here, you know. That's the way it works when you get people together that work together in a shop. They're going to share ideas. They're going to support each other. This one happens to be supported by a small business development center group and by several other organizations in the community who are using it to provide training and support to those entrepreneurs so that they can get business plans, get financing, and make something much more out of their business. Now,
who is typically financially backing a lot of these large spaces? I mean, we're in a really small town.
okay.
That has
What's your town?
Bayan,
Okay,
Oklahoma.
you bet.
So we have access right off the interstate for most of the traffic going up to Lake Tenkiller. But you've
Nice.
got people, well, it's good. It's got a old downtown area, but you have people having squabbles over, both me and my brother own this building, and neither one of us are going to sell our part. And this building has been here forever, and I'm holding out for a whole bunch of money on it.
Right.
So they're kind of junking up the area. Nobody's willing to sell because they're sitting on things.
I see a lot of people nodding.
And
You
then-
may perhaps not be the only town
Well,
like
I know
that.
I'm not the only one. And then we've got other building spaces that, hey, this whole section burned down. It's vacant.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out, is it that people are coming in like Cherokee Nation incubator programs are backing this, or is it USDA economic development, or is it just, hey, we need to get this rich guy that has,
Where is that rich guy who's going to finance everything? We've been looking for him.
We've tried that in the area, just saying, well, we've got this guy that's, multi-millionaire from
Right.
Oklahoma City, and he's in the area. Maybe he would purchase this empty space and pay for us to renovate it, and then we could supply local labor to do this, and then he basically owns it and rents out the spaces inside of it. So we're just trying to figure out
And
how you can
it's
do that.
Isaac is your name?
Yeah.
Okay. Isaac's telling, I'm going to go ahead and recite that then. What he said is they've got a whole bunch of different problems with finding buildings to work with, and how do you finance making something like a big shared space of work? And that's the key question. So, and you gave us a list of like the common small town reasons that you can't use a building. The owners are fighting amongst themselves. they're holding out for way too much money, they refuse to do anything, they died, and we don't know who owns it for real now. That's a good one. You know, there's all those reasons that buildings downtown cannot be used. But fortunately, you have some traffic and you have a possible financial backer. So who backs these things in various places? The next example we're going to talk about was actually backed by the Chickasaw Nation, so we'll talk about that. The Innovation Lab that I told you about in Sonora, that was backed by just a group of different organizations in town. So they got the SBDC together with another organization, and I don't even remember who all his local players were. My friend Greg Falcon told me about it, and but they drew together a bunch of governmental and semi-governmental organizations to work together to make that makerspace happen. And it is still plugging along, he tells me, which is kind of a struggle to make something so new make sense for people. Veal Hoden, which is the one in Pella, Iowa, started from the community upwards. Joel Bennett, who was the guy that started it, got together with friends of his who all wanted a place to work. They went together and they pooled their money and borrowed some money and got a good deal on a building because somebody believed in them, which is kind of tricky. But, you know, in each case, you use whatever assets you can leverage in your community. So it can happen people up with no organizations whatsoever involved, or it can come from the organizations in, where the organizations draw together. But in each case, you have to have that community of people who are going to make use of it. The shared spaces that where you take a building and divide it up often is done by the building owner themselves out of frustration of being unable to rent the giant space. And so that's one opportunity. The other thing is, we talked about that pop-up into the empty building, which is a terrific tool when you have these kind of small town squabbles of not being able to get buildings ready to use, is say, well, could we get 20 feet at the front? Could you move your junk out of 20 feet? We'll hang a curtain and we'll put a pop-up in the front of it. Just move your junk to the back, just that much. And then we'll put a little small space in there only for Christmas, okay? It's just going to be there for the holidays, not for long. You don't have to bring everything up to code. In the back of the building that's collapsed, we're not even going to go back there. So that is another tool that really helps, because then people come in and they see the building dressed up and it looks like a store and they go, I could rent this. This building's available. My daughter, who lives 2 towns over, was looking for a place to put her law office, and maybe this would actually work. And so that is the killer tool for filling empty buildings, is opening them up and getting people in there. And pop-ups are the way you do it. Now, there's one other trick, which is the burned out building. You mentioned a burned out building, collapsed building. The building with no roof, you know, the one, it's a floor and it's the wall of the building next to it and it's not there anymore. Like it might have a facade, but it might not. Those buildings, all right, there's an article that I wrote that was like 19 things to do with a building that has no roof. And so if you search roofless building ideas, eventually you'll find that article. But there are things like parking food trucks on it, holding a farmer's market on it. Like there's a billion things you can do with a building that has no roof. And we tend to look at them and go, well, there's nothing we can do. Outside seating for a restaurant nearby, you know, temporary restaurant, pop-up event, booths for you can hold a little mini event, you can have a petting zoo. I mean, seriously, there are a lot of ideas you can do, but you have to get them to agree to let you do something. And all those little short temporary ideas are ways that you convince them to do. See, it's like the smaller steps model for entrepreneurs. We're going to do the smaller steps model on building owners. They're never even going to know you're doing it. You're just going to be like, hey, we just need to borrow it for an afternoon. The kids are going to come down and do a petting zoo and we'll clean up when we get done. And they're like, okay, fine. And then you're like, hey, I'm back. We're going to do a week-long thing where we're having a special art exhibit. So, and then they're like, okay, fine, you can do a week. All right. Then you're like, hey, by the way, I'm back again. And you just, eventually they're like, are you doing something this week? You're like, gotcha. All right. And then you've got them hooked and you can work with them that way. So use the small steps model as your cheater's way to get those reluctant building owners to actually do something. Okay. Makerspaces. The other makerspace we're going to talk about, and I did it again, I bounced twice. I promised we'd talk about the one from the Chickasaw Nation. This is not the actual one. Across the street from the big, beautiful Artesian Hotel is a smaller and less known thing, the Artesian Gallery. And they write it with ART in capital letters, so it's the Artesian Gallery. Have you been there? No. Anybody been to the Artesian Gallery? Mark, oh, you have. You did?
Yeah, I covered that county.
You cover that county. They're your folks. Okay. It's actually a really terrific space. Mark Mulligan, who's with Chickasaw Nation, told me about the vision for that is like a collaborative co-working space for artists. So if you think, Makerspace was all about make these physical products. What do artists do? They make physical products. So we could make a collaborative working space for them as well. And then it becomes an arts incubator. And he said that it reminded him of when he was in college. When he was in college, he had the opportunity to be exposed to a lot of other artists working with different media who had a lot of different ideas and lots of ways of bringing emotion to life. And that's what he did as an artist. And so he grew so much as an artist by that exposure to other artists doing cool things. Now, how many artists in the Sulphur area who are currently working out of their garage or basement or extra bedroom can afford to open a gallery downtown in Sulphur across from the Artesian? How many can afford to get into the Artesian Gallery? We're making this hurdle a lot smaller, so more people can get in there, although I understand it's really competitive to get in there, which I understand. But this is going to spread. There will be more art space will spring up. The town of Sulphur is going to have a lot more art stuff going on. So that's an example of turning a makerspace into an artist's makerspace. In Alva, Oklahoma, there's a woman named Carolyn Demery who owns an empty building that used to be a chiropractic office, so it's got lots of little spaces in it. And she has retired, and so she says, I'm too old to do this, and I don't want to do it now. But she's a quilt artist and makes beautiful quilt art. And she said, what I really would like to do is to take that and put an artist in each room, and we all bring our equipment, and I'll bring my long arm quilting equipment, and then everybody will bring their stuff. And they're going to all bring fabric. There'll be a fabric swap going on the first day while they're all there. And then they would have a shared space to display up front. They'd all have workspace in the middle, and it would be this artists cooperative. She said, I'm not in a position to do that. So that idea hasn't come to fruition yet, but that's the kind of idea that you're looking for. And if you didn't know that Carolyn was the person you were looking for to ask that question, it would be really hard to find her. I ran into her at a downtown event, and she told me about this dream, and I thought, oh. And so I tried to give her some connections of people that might help make that happen. Since she has the building, she just needs somebody with the drive to help make that kind of thing happen. So when you run people into each other, when you help them to connect by bringing more life and activity to your town, so more people have a chance to just chat, then more of these kind of things will end up happening. Because I had no idea Carolyn was dreaming about that until she snuck it into a conversation at the women's dress shop. Okay, our last business model. How are we on time? Oh, okay, we've got 8 minutes. And we're on model number 8. We're in good shape. Mobile businesses. Okay, businesses that can't sit still. You've seen a barbecue trailer somewhere in your life. You live in Oklahoma, I know you have. And you've been to the fair, and there's all kinds of food trucks at the fair. Food trucks have moved out of the fair. They are everywhere now, and they have gone upscale. So it's not just, good old boys barbecue, but there is actually like gourmet grilled cheese and fancy noodles and just everything you can imagine. Very small menu, very small space, very mobile. Because if you're in that small town, if you're in Isaacstown in Vian, and there are no available buildings that you can rent, there's nobody that's up to code, it's going to be a lot cheaper to get a trailer hooked up than it is to try to take one of those buildings, convince the two brothers to quit fighting, and bring it up to code, and then sell it to you. So this gives you that intermediate step, and so we're seeing a lot of these go on. The other thing is there may be only a limited amount of market for your really cool, awesome noodles in Vian. But if you will drive around to the neighboring towns, you can be at everybody's event. There's an event happening every weekend. You can go everywhere, and you can build up a market by moving around. So we're seeing not just food, though. We're also seeing a lot of interesting retail going on. Women's retail has moved into trucks and trailers in a big way. We're also seeing interesting things like there's a woman doing financial planning out of a renovated bus. So that bus space gives her the opportunity to have a private meeting with a client, set up and do some discussions, carry materials with her that she may need to show or give to them. Here's your homework packet for your financial planning, that kind of thing. And she's able to go different places. If you were going to do financial planning in a small town, you would probably reach the limit of your market fairly quickly, but you can move. You can be in other towns and you can go other places, be part of events, and people that never even thought about financial planning can see the bus and go, I didn't even realize this was for me, but I'm going to ask her that question I thought about my mother's estate. And then you're going to learn more. So that's how cool is that? Mobile financial planning. Now, you remember way back at the beginning of the talk, I said that at Webster City's Junk Fest, the dressy junk, that there's a vendor there that's using one of these other models. And that is a woman that is doing a bridal shop and wedding planning. And she has a beautiful trailer. Like, I believe it's an Airstream because it's really nice. And she is going to be at Junk Fest this year in June in Webster City, Iowa. Now, she can travel to how many small towns and collect enough bridal business to keep afloat. Now, if she was only in Webster City, there's only 7,500 people in Webster City. There's only so many brides every year. This may not be enough to survive on. And how could she ever afford to open a bridal store in 7 different small towns? But she can take her trailer and she can be at Junk Fest and she can be at something else the next week and she can be at something else the week after that. And she can take a week off and nobody necessarily notices, like if you have a store that's downtown that's locked up for a week. So that's the mobile truck and trailer model. And what a beautiful model it is. I love it for small towns. Now, I promised you there would be a quiz. We have reached the quiz. Now, in the time we have remaining, which is 4 minutes, who has a great example of one of these you've actually seen out in the world? You do.
I live in Norman, and so downtown Norman, lots of the shops, but the one I'm thinking of is a couple of the coffee shops, books, art on the wall, jewelry.
Right,
So
right.
you walk in to get a coffee, or in one case a glass of wine, or in that case some chocolate, but I can also browse books and art while I'm, so. And they have local musicians set up in the shop, playing different musicians every weekend, so that kind of makes it a whole experience, and there are several of those in Norman.
Cool.
So.
Okay, so that's in Norman, Oklahoma, a number of stores, coffee shops, chocolate or wine that all have additional stuff in there, art on the walls, books, cool stuff to look at. And Goffstown, New Hampshire has a project called Art on the Walls, where they go in once a quarter and they take over the walls of existing businesses with local art. Art on the Walls, Goffstown, New Hampshire. Yes, Jolene.
I have a daughter that has a business within a business. She has an insurance business, a cell phone business, and a tag agency.
Oh, that's
in
cool.
Laverne, Oklahoma.
In Laverne. Oh my gosh, that's in my corner. All right. So it's the insurance agency, the tag office, and a cell phone, all in one store, and that's your daughter. Awesome. Laverne, Oklahoma. Okay, yes.
I have two real quick. One, right down the street from Brian's, we have the Buckingham Palace, and there's a picture of a pig that's bucking. It's a Buckingham.
The Buckingham. Buckingham.
And
Oh.
they have all these different cute little, so back to Isaac's question where you have, do you have a person stationed at each one? No, theirs is like a consignment, so everything is tagged and coded to the person that it belongs to, so there's one person working that register. The other example I want to give you is maybe more commercial than entrepreneurial.
Okay.
But in Welling, Oklahoma, there's the gas station that's also a feed store and laundromat, and you can buy your bait and groceries.
No, wait, we got to do this list again. Gas station, laundromat, grocery store, bait.
Bait. You can also tan there.
Oh, you can also tan. Okay, because I'm going out on the boat, I need to tan.
And
Okay.
you can check in your deer if you've been hunting.
And they're a deer check station. That's entrepreneurial. I like it. It's you think of it as commercial, but I'm betting that there are also, I bet there's some local entrepreneurs taking advantage of this, popping up inside there that have a rack of something on consignment, I bet that's an incubator. I bet that's what that really is. The Buckingham. Okay, all right. Okay, yes.
In McAllister, Oklahoma,
This side of the room's going to have to step up here in a second. All right. In McAllister.
there was a department store. It was Hunt's department store. It went out of business. There was a fire, all that.
Right.
The family bought the property. And in McAllister, there were 3 offices, the Chamber, the Pride of McAllister, and one other that I've just gone blank. But they were different places, throughout McAllister. Well, this
Oh.
person allowed them to build little mini offices
boxes all in one place in that.
Excellent. So that's in McAllister.
One stop, and then on the other part, he has all those little pop-up businesses, crafts,
Ooh.
a little lemonade stand, and, inside the other part.
Excellent. So that's in McAllister.
And they did like I think it was called a pop-up park or something, but like in the parking space.
Yes, pop-up park. Okay.
They built a little deck and put little flowers and tables with umbrellas.
How cool. Okay, I'll summarize that right quick. They had an old department store. A lot of agencies, the Chamber and Main Street and other groups went in and built their offices right in there so they weren't scattered around town. And then the other side is small retail, shared space retail. And then they did the pop-up park thing where you take a paved area and you make it into a park temporarily. Just put a little deck, some flowers, plants. Okay, at least one from this side of the room. Okay, we've got two. You were first. You're excited.
This was an opportunity. We get a lot of talents in my office. I'm in Muskogee, Oklahoma.
Okay.
So we just have a huge spelling group, and I'm employment specialist.
Yes.
For workforce. And I had a guy come in. He lived at the lake at Eufaula. They were there permanently because the wife's mom was ill, whatever.
Right.
And he couldn't find a job. Nobody would hire him, but he was a chef.
Ooh.
So I said, you got to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And so I suggested the trailer, the mobile trailer.
You bet.
Put it on the lake, go to events around the lake, and have it at the lake because there's very little at the big Eufaula Lake down there
Yeah.
he's at to eat. So I said, if you had a great menu and use your skills and really, get something that everybody likes. in that
Right,
area.
absolutely.
So he just loved it. So last I heard, that's where he was going. So
Awesome.
we're just kind of excited.
Okay, now there's some people trickling out, and before they do, I want to tell you, I'm going to skip over results because you guys understand the results. But I will tell you, it does work, and you can pull all the ideas together. But this address, smallbizsurvival.com/workforce, has some special stuff there for you. You will be able to get from the workforce site, from this conference, they're going to have just a PDF of my slides, but that's just photos. If you want the resource document with links, and you're really interested in this kind of stuff, I do a weekly newsletter called A Positive View of Rural, and I promise you can read it even if you're not rural. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll also get the 20 business ideas that you can do in a small town, as well as the resource links that go with this art on the walls and the Tianesta Market Village and links to those things that I promised we would talk about. And then I'm going to summarize what Cindy was just telling me, which was this is a great tool for people that have a felony record or some other reason, bad credit, or some reason others won't trust them or they can't make that leap to being in business in a big way. They can use this as a tool. Any of these small steps give them more opportunities to get into business in a way that they can build up the assets, the experience, and the abilities, the resources, to then move into business in a bigger way. I think that's a great example of going out to the lake, where there's a lot of people and a great market to tap into. Okay, you had another idea right quick?
Okay, yeah, Stratford, Oklahoma.
Stratford, Oklahoma,
Has a little over, it's got 1,519 residents there.
1,500
But
people.
they're world known for their peaches.
Peaches, you bet. See, everybody knows the Stratford Peach Festival, you bet.
And so you get vendors all the time who are setting up, and selling jewelry. Just recently, they've had an area where they can sell vehicles again.
Nice.
They're on the corner where the traffic interlines. The people get to be more creative and they set up their own booths and they can go from one festival to another. And if you can't find somewhere to go, if there's not a holiday, if there's not a season, create your own.
Absolutely.
And again, you follow Oklahoma
Yeah.
is known for their whole hog festival.
Yeah.
So come on, if they can come up with a whole hog festival, we can come up with ideas, like you said, a girls' night out.
Yes.
A senior
That's a great example of that. You don't have to wait for an event. If there's not an event coming up that you can take your business to, make your own event. Get together with a couple other businesses and go, hey, we're going to have an event. All right? See, Helen's in with me. We're going to make an event. So,
senior art education, where you can get local art teachers, a theater instructor from your high school can get senior citizens together to do an outdoor presentation by the seniors, so that you can contribute to them to help keep them going and
You bet. All right, was that the high sign? We are out of time, and I'm holding you back from lunch. Thank you all for everything you do to support your communities and support entrepreneurs. You're changing the world. Thank you.